Good evening, everyone. Hope all doing very well and you're having a wonderful Tuesday. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to discuss about 10 minutes or so about what is happening today in the region and why, as we are going to see, the world that we knew, in other words, in the Middle East that we knew, will never come back. That Middle East from even a month ago, 2 months ago, it's completely gone. And we are going to discuss that briefly. And so, but before I do, I just want to say two things. Number one, I want to thank you so much for signing up, for giving me your opinions, and for writing. I certainly appreciate that, and I'm honored. At the same time, I'd like to apologize for not being able to respond to every comment. It's not that I'm being disrespectful. It's not that I'm not reading it. It's just it's impossible for me to respond to every single one. So please don't get offended. I thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to even express my opinion. And the second thing I was going to say is that um, if you are more interested, please read my previous work and watch my previous videos because it will give you an idea of how I gather my information and from what spectrum I examine and analyze the current environment we're in. Ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, I'm just going to make it 7 or 8 minutes talking about why the world that you know today in the Middle East, why the Middle East that you see today, one that is dominated up to, I should say, a month ago by Western Eurocentric Israeli Arab leadership is gone. That Middle East no longer states, ladies and gentlemen, that no longer exists because the entities that allow it to remain that way be the political and to a lesser extent, but nonetheless, political power of Israel no longer exist. Be the magnificent military power that no one thought it's going to be ever broken, that no longer exists. Or for that matter, the Arab leadership in specific countries or the Arab hegemony. What you see, ladies and gentlemen, today, ironically, actually, is an Islamic Asiatic Middle East. And you're beginning to see that where Western powers once dominated the system are really now Asiatic powers. Even though some you may not see someone as an Muslim background, like the case of Russia or the case of Indonesia, but it is, ladies and gentlemen, an Islamic Asiatic world, one that's dominated by the PIC alliance, which is Pakistan, Iran, China, TIM alliance, Turkey, Iran, Malaysia, all under the umbrella of Chinese, Iranian, Russian alliance. And so, whether you're watching the trio, which is the Chinese, Iranian, Russian alliance, the Syria alliance in the Levant, creating a separate economic entity, or whether you are watching what is happening today in the Middle East, that past power in the Middle East is gone, not just because economically, but more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, militarily and politically. And politically, I mean, ladies and gentlemen, the powers were largely United States and Israel until Alexander the Arab. Well, Israel as a military power and as a political power, it's gone. And that is because the world, thanks to social media, thanks to Israel's behavior, thanks to findings like the Epstein file, the WikiLeaks in charge, Israel is no longer seen as that moral entity in the Western world or even the Eurocentric Western world that was treated differently because of its own behavior, because of the leakage in Epstein file and all the social media posts came out. That political power that allowed Israel to dominate the region as a power is no longer there. So yes, United States and Israel are allies, but even within the United States, the power of Zionism is being significantly challenged because of its reputation. And so that ability to be treated differently from Iran or from Russia, or excuse me, I should say from the Arab countries, that difference is no longer as powerful as it once was. On the contrary, when you go to the global south, which is 70% of the world, that is the non Eurocentric, non Western systems, they no longer have that perception of Israel. And even within the Western world. So the political hegemony of being so culturally, politically, in terms of westernization, democracy is gone. And that is exceptionally important for a country like Iran because Iran's issue with Israel wasn't so much military, but it was its political influence. With that political influence significantly challenged, and add to that its military um, issues with the war with Iran, its power as ability to dominate is significantly challenged. And so when you take that and when you take its military losses in Lebanon, even though it's not covered by the Western press, in its war with Iran, even though it's not generally covered by the traditional Western press, when you add the two, you will see that its power is not only significantly gone, but the Israel of 30 years ago is never going to come back. And partially because of its own internal crisis, partially because of the Zionist influence, partially because of the internal debate within the country. So that entity politically is gone. And in the tapes of the United States, its moral standing because of one law for the Israelis, one law for everyone else, particularly when you compare the treatment of the Ukraine Russian war versus the Israeli Palestinian war has significantly damaged its influence and its reputation. Now, you may say that, well, that was always the case. Yes, but thanks to social media, thanks to a different generation, that power has been significantly challenged now. And the concept of democracy is one that is used by many new emerging powers of saying, okay, I'm not just going to trust United States carte blanche. I'm not going to trust Israel carte blanche. As a matter of fact, this is Israel's fault. That's why when you look at the war that's happening today, it's largely United States openly and Israel. Very few countries are openly supporting or even in the background supporting United States. But that will also leave militarily, ladies and gentlemen, and economically. You cannot deny the fact that Israel has received massive damage, and even the United States. Look, the Iranians have also been hit. No one says that. They haven't. But the fact that they took out 10 countries and they took out virtually 70% of the power of the American bases, they took, which included half of its TAD system, AWACS, its C-17 planes, sent a message to the international community and to the region that these Iranians are not what they thought they would be, right? You'd have a country that could spend $1 million in using 50 $20,000 videos or 200,000 missiles and 40, whatever, 20,000 videos and take missiles, and then take down a $400 million AWACS or TAD. So, point being, ladies and gentlemen, the military power, I should say, the political power, absolute power of the West, it's gone. And so, in return, what do you see here? You are seeing new powers. You are seeing China emerging as a dominating actor. In a second piece, Russia's standing there, not just economically and not just openly and directly, but indirectly, ladies and gentlemen, in a sense that the Chinese are going to some Arab countries and Islamic countries, I should say, and say, look, this is a new power emerging. You could join our camp, right? Join Iran, join Iraq, join us all. And so, what it seems right now is that the victors tend to be, again, Asiatic countries, be China, be Pakistan. So that is exceptionally important, ladies and gentlemen. In many ways, I like to say what you're seeing is the emergency of a second Abbasid dynasty. And by that I mean is that for those who know history, realize about 8 centuries or so, the Arab Umayyad dynasty ended and it was replaced by the Persian Abbasid dynasty, which not only began the golden age of Islam for several centuries, but it ended the Arab influence. You see that now emerging. The dominating powers are Pakistan, or Indonesia, or Turkey, or Iran, or, although non Islamic, certainly China. Now you can say, well, Russia is Europe. Russia is really Eurasia, right? These are acting that are making, for the lack of a better term, profit or exercising influence. It's not so much the Western countries. And so, again, the world that you knew 40 days ago, it's gone. It's never going to come back in many ways. And that was partially supported by the Arab leaderships that you have, and Arab leaderships that had a covenant for all 50 years with its population. Be Bahrain, be Saudi Arabia, be Jordan, be UAE, particularly in the case of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Bahrain. That covenant allowed the United States to maintain its position. It allowed actually Israel to maintain its position, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly. Well, so when that covenant is broken, and you can see it's broken in the Holy Trinity, again, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Bahrain, the ability of the United States and Israel and the Western world to exercise their power is significantly reduced. Whether you agree or disagree, who's going to charge, who's going to be in charge of Jordan, who's going to be in charge of Saudi Arabia, who's going to be in charge of Bahrain, it does not matter. What matter is the covenant is broken. And in those countries that the covenant is broken, the entities, in this case, the tribes and the clergy, though in some areas the tribes are much more important than the clergy, like in the case of Jordan, are no longer allowing their current leadership to continue what it was, right? And because they're challenging the system, they're going to make sure that the next leader that comes in, and by the way, it doesn't have to be a bloody coup, it could be an under quiet type of a coup, will make sure that its relationship with the West is significantly different because they are looking at China, they're looking at Russia. What they're seeing is they're the allies of Iran, the same Iran that has devastated the American bases, the same Iran that has taken the 10 countries. So, ladies and gentlemen, what I wanted to say is what you're seeing now is really the emergence of the Second Abbasid dynasty in many ways. And what you're seeing is the power really being shifted, if you want to go from west to east, for the lack of a better term. And so, as the United States debates about, I'm going to open up a ceasefire, I'm going to end the ceasefire, I'm going to continue the ceasefire, I'm going to close the Persian Gulf, I'm going to open the Persian Gulf, all of these matter, but they're like noise, right? They're really like noise. Because as of now, the entities that the United States relied on, the bases are gone. The political leadership, such as King Abdullah, MBS of Saudi Arabia, the the leadership in Qatar, and not so much Qatar, I apologize, as in Bahrain, no longer exercise that power. And ladies and gentlemen, when one of those three goes, one way or another, that would really be a signal to the United States that the shift has begun, and that a new system is emerging. So let's keep it up on that. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or comments, just let me know. And thank you so much for signing up. Take care.